The articles I read this week highlight African American athletes' involvement in civil rights issues, ranging from Bill Russell in the 1950s and 60s to Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Kobe Bryant, Serena Williams, and Colin Kaepernick. The first article I read was Bill Russell and the Basketball Revolution, written in 2006 by Dr. Aram Goodsouzian. The article emphasized the career of Bill Russell and the social and political implications that his career had. As the NBA's first black superstar, Russell integrated the game, changed the style of the game, and changed the perspective of black athletes in America. His fierce individuality complicated the idea of what was expected of black athletes as players and as activists. He shows how Russell questioned the nonviolent strategies of Martin Luther King Jr., he denounced the racial climate in Boston, and challenged mainstream liberal assumptions about black participation in sports. He never rejected American values, ideals, or institutions. Goodsouzian uses primary sources, white newspapers, as well as African American newspapers like the Chicago Defender, and also secondary sources about the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement to provide a larger context. He concludes that Russell instilled an overt political dimension into basketball and forced fans to see him as more than a political symbol. This applies to my research in that it gives a national perspective that adds context to my local dissertation focus. The second article I read was Be Like Mike, The Black Athlete's Dilemma, written by Joshua Wright, Associate Professor of History at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore in 2016. This socio-political article focuses on another NBA superstar, Michael Jordan. Wright argues that modern black athletes have a dilemma, to be or not to be like Mike. One of the examples he uses is Michael Jordan's refusal to support a black Democratic candidate for Senate in North Carolina and saying his often quoted phrase, "Republicans buy sneakers too." Wright investigates Jordan's historical significance within the black community and pushes back against the opinion that black athletes must express concern over social issues in order to maintain acceptance. He uses primary sources, new mediums like tweets from Twitter from athletes, interviews on TV, oral history, secondary sources about black identity and social responsibility. And he also uses Jordan as a point of comparison to look at other modern athletes like Tiger Woods, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Serena Williams. He concludes that it is unfair to expect Michael Jordan to uplift a race of people because of his skin color, and argued that blackness shouldn't be defined by specific categories or parameters. Just because he's been less active than others, it doesn't make him any less black than Jim Brown or Bill Russell. This applies to my research in that it gives a present-day look at what activism by African American athletes looks like. The third article I read was The Olympic Revolt of 1968 and its Lessons for Contemporary African American Athletic Activism, written by Douglas Hartman in 2019. Hartman says the current state of activism isn't unprecedented. They've built on the legacy of those who came before. He highlights that athletic activism is still a hotly debated topic, like Muhammad Ali and John Carlos and Tommy Smith in the 1960s faced backlash. Colin Kaepernick hasn't played another game in the NFL. Hartman does this by giving a basic historical overview of the organizing effort behind the 1968 Mexico City Olympics, and then compares and contrasts the athletic activism of the 60s with the protests and advocacy we are currently witnessing. To do this, he uses books about race, religion, and representation, books about sports media and the color line, essays, newspaper and magazine articles. He argues that sports can provide a platform for socially minded, change-oriented athletes and supporters to provoke difficult conversations, but its real societal power lies in the ability of athletic activists to attract attention and impact broader cultural narratives about gender, race, and social justice. It impacts my research in that it gives first-hand accounts into the era I'm dealing with, sets the social, political, and cultural scene for what was taking place in St. Louis during this time, and gives a new way to view how athletes and activists were viewed then versus now. I found several St. Louis-centric topics, and so these articles offer a broad perspective of the intersection of sports, race, and society from the 1960s to today, and gives context within which to place my dissertation topic of sports, race, and the civil rights movement in St. Louis.